They were built to be places of healing, shining symbols of science and compassion. Now they're just monuments to the forgotten. Their hallways echo with more than just the wind. Their rooms are filled with a silence that feels heavier than any sound. Tonight, we're taking you inside 3 of the world's most terrifying abandoned hospitals. Each one is hiding a dark secret, a story of tragedy that's been left to rot within its decaying walls. But you should know, the last place we're going to explore is different. It's not just a hospital, it's a monument to a plague. A place with a death toll so high, they had to build a secret tunnel just to hide the bodies. Its most infamous room holds a story so tragic, it has become a legend of its own. So, stay with us, if you dare. Enter, if you dare. Exit, if you can. And don't forget, if these tales intrigue or disturb you, hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe to the Diabolists Lab on YouTube and TikTok. Now, let's begin. The Palace of Glass, that became a warehouse for the damned. We begin our journey in Northville, Michigan, when Northville State Hospital opened its doors in 1952. It was seen as a modern marvel. People called it the Palace of Glass, a beacon of hope for psychiatric care. It was a sprawling campus, set on over 450 wooded acres with 20 different buildings. This was supposed to be a new kind of treatment, a self-sufficient community with art and music therapy, its own theater, a bowling alley, and even a gym. It was a pioneer, praised as one of the best psychiatric hospitals in the entire country. But that dream soured, and it soured fast. The hospital was designed for 650 patients, but soon it became dangerously overcrowded. By the late 1950s, more than 2,000 people were crammed inside its walls. Some were even forced to sleep in the gymnasium. As the years went by, state budget cuts started to bleed Northville dry. Therapy programs were cut, staff were laid off, and the once gleaming equipment just sat there, aging into junk. The mission shifted from therapy to medication, from healing to just containment. By the 1980s, things had deteriorated into an absolute nightmare. Investigative reports uncovered a hidden world of shocking neglect and abuse. Patients were warehoused, left to wander the hallways in a medicated haze, chain smoking and watching TV with no real treatment at all. One former staff member was quoted as saying, "People are not treated at Northville, they are warehoused." The stories from inside are horrifying. Assault, theft, and unspeakable acts of violence were terrifyingly common. Patients died during struggles with staff, and some were even killed by other patients. The son of one woman remembered how his mother's only treatment was being restrained to a bed and left in a hallway for days at a time. To make matters worse, a huge cultural gap between foreign-born doctors and local patients made communication nearly impossible, which only added to the isolation and despair. Escapes became so routine that people living nearby got used to finding desperate, wandering patients in their own backyards. In the 1990s, Michigan began shutting down its large mental hospitals, moving toward community-based care. Northville, once the flagship, was one of the last to go. It was simply too old and too expensive to fix for the few hundred patients still there. In May of 2003, the last patient was moved out, and the doors of Northville State Hospital were locked for good. For years, its 20 buildings sat empty, a sprawling campus of decay, haunted by rumors and the very real tragedies that happened within its walls. The ghosts of Northville aren't just stories. They're the memories of suffering, etched into the very foundation of the place. The time capsule of chaos. From a nightmare of human design, we now travel to New Orleans, Louisiana, to a hospital that wasn't shut down by budget cuts or new ideas, but by the raw fury of nature. This is Charity Hospital, a place that became a frozen moment in time, a perfect and terrifying time capsule of disaster. First established way back in 1736, Big Charity was a cornerstone of New Orleans and the second longest continually running hospital in the United States. For centuries, it was the city's safety net, where anyone, especially the poor, could find help. The iconic Art Deco tower we see today was built in 1939, growing into a massive million-square-foot institution. Then, in August 2005, Hurricane Katrina hit. When the levees broke, floodwaters tore through the city, and the hospital lost all power. The basement, where the morgue and all the critical electrical equipment were located, was completely submerged. The scene inside plunged into absolute chaos. As the morgue flooded, the bodies of the dead began floating through the basement hallways, forcing the horrified staff to stack them in stairwells just to get them out of the water. Over 1,500 patients and staff were trapped inside for days. There was no power and no AC in the suffocating Louisiana heat. Food and water were running out. Doctors and nurses heroically kept their sickest patients alive by hand-pumping oxygen bags. They carried people up and down pitch-black stairwells, desperately trying to get them to the roof for evacuation. It was a desperate struggle for survival inside a building that was quickly becoming a tomb. A full week after the storm, the last person was finally evacuated. But in the aftermath, a shocking decision was made. Even though military and volunteer crews had cleaned the hospital and declared it medical ready just weeks later, the state announced that Charity Hospital would never reopen. The doors were locked, and for all intents and purposes, it felt like everything was left behind. For nearly 2 decades, Charity Hospital has stood abandoned, a million-square-foot monument to the storm. Urban explorers who've made their way inside have found a truly chilling scene. They've discovered surgeon records from the 1960s, carts full of containers waiting for the morgue, and even plastic buckets filled with preserved body parts, just left to slowly rot in the heat. Communication boards still show the desperate messages scrawled by staff during the hurricane. Microscopes sit on tables warped by years of humidity, and entire labs and patient rooms look like their occupants simply vanished in the middle of a procedure. This was an institution abandoned in its most desperate hour, and that feeling of panic and tragedy has been sealed inside ever since. The Mountain of Death. And that brings us to our final stop. We've seen a hospital destroyed by neglect, and another by a hurricane, but this last place was built for death itself. Welcome to Waverly Hills Sanatorium in Louisville, Kentucky, one of the most haunted places on Earth. In the early 1900s, Jefferson County was ravaged by an outbreak of tuberculosis, a terrifying disease known as the White Plague. To isolate the sick, a 2-story wooden hospital was built on a secluded hill. But the plague worsened. A massive new hospital, a 5-story Gothic fortress, was built, opening in 1926 to house over 400 patients. Waverly Hills was a self-contained city with its own farms, post office, and water treatment, because once you went up the hill, you likely weren't coming back down. The death toll was staggering. Before the discovery of an effective antibiotic, treatment was experimental and often brutal. Patients were wheeled onto open-air porches, even in the freezing winter, in the belief that fresh air could cure them. The sheer number of deaths became a moral problem. To solve this, a 500-foot tunnel was built, leading from the hospital to the bottom of the hill. Originally used for supplies, it soon had a new purpose: to secretly transport the bodies of the dead away from the eyes of the living. It became known as the Body Chute. While legends claim over 60,000 people died, a more realistic estimate is still a horrifying 8,000. The hospital's most infamous legend is that of Room 502. The story goes that in 1928, a head nurse, unmarried and pregnant, took her own life in this room. Another nurse is said to have jumped from the same room's window a few years later. Today, visitors report hearing a voice shout, "Get out," when they approach the door. With the discovery of streptomycin, the need for TB hospitals vanished, and Waverly Hills closed in 1961. It reopened a year later as the Woodhaven Geriatric Center, but its dark history continued. Woodhaven was shut down by the state in 1982 due to horrific patient neglect and abuse. Left to rot, the building became a magnet for ghost hunters, whose stories of shadow people, disembodied voices, and sightings of a ghostly boy named Timmy cemented its terrifying reputation. The pain of this place has seeped into the stone, a constant, chilling reminder of the thousands who suffered and died within its walls. Darkness doesn't always hide. Sometimes it invites you in. From the tragic decay of Northville to the chaotic final moments of Charity and the unimaginable suffering at Waverly Hills, these hospitals hold stories that refuse to die. They remind us that the most terrifying monsters are often the ones in our own history, and that some places really are best left abandoned. If this video left you questioning everything, show your support with a like and drop a comment with your theory. Subscribe to the Diabolists Lab on YouTube and TikTok, and if our work speaks to you, consider fueling the fire through the Ko-fi link in the description. And remember, keep your eyes open and your doors locked. Evil waits for those who open the wrong one.